the best way for us, the most practical way for us to understand if there's a gap that we're unaware of or need to pay attention to is think back in the last 2 weeks of your life, whether it's with your wife or your kids or at work or in your community, wherever it might be, or even just personally. Was there a time when your reaction to the issue at hand was bigger than the issue at hand? If there was, you have a gap.
Maybe a fun place to start today. I know this about you from two angles, but making leather goods, okay? Working with leather.
My hobby. Yeah.
Right. Yes. How long has the hobby been? Yeah, like tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah. So one of my roommates from college is a church planter in Charlotte and started this like baller high-end leather company called
Okay.
Colson Keene.
Wow.
So the reason that's important is in his first year of business, like 15 years ago, I bought one of his leather cases and I'm like, man, this is really cool. And I was looking for a hobby that didn't take me away from home, right? Like golfing, you're out to the course, you're gone,
Sure.
right? I
Sure.
wanted something that I could go to the basement at night and do. And so I thought, well, let me just try this leather work.
Yeah.
So I bought a roll of leather and just started like cutting and sewing and just messing around with it. And as things do, a few years in, some people heard about it, said, hey, what about Christmas gifts? And then a local bookstore said, we want some custom journals. And so, man, it just kind of evolved from there. And man, there's nothing like working with your hands,
Right.
creating something right. And then, I'm holding up like a leather case I made for my computer, and then
Yeah.
just having something really nice to use.
You
So,
can, I mean, intersect with that hobby. I mean, every hour you could touch something, whether it's maybe it's something you're wearing, a
I wear a
bracelet, or
bracelet.
yeah,
Oh, so
right.
here's a cool thing. I don't know if you can actually, behind me,
Yeah.
inside of that shadow box,
I
that's
see
my
it.
last 7 years of words for the year. That's what bracelets I wear.
So
And
I've
so
heard about this where you pray through a word and you actually wear the word. Is this
I
right?
wear the word. There's a constant reminder as a bracelet of the word, kind of my intention for the year. So this year is trust. But if you look down through that, and one day my kiddos, right, when I'm long gone, will be able to see what did my dad think about and prioritize in his life, right, through that little simple shadow box idea. So,
Whoa, whoa. Okay, trust is this year. Give two other examples over the past few years
oh,
of
bro,
words.
you're gonna get a kick out of this one. So as I was entering into 2020, I was in the book of Daniel,
Okay.
and the word my word for 2020, this was
Yeah, three
pre-pandemic,
three
was
months before it hit.
was apocalypto.
You wait, you
Bro, I don't
prayed
know.
into
It's
a
weird,
theme
right?
for the
But
year of
apocalypto, which means to reveal, is the core of that word. And I felt like God needed to reveal some new things, which he certainly did in 2020,
whoa.
right? So that'd be one example. And then
Yep.
another kind of has a dual meaning for me. I think my first one in there was just one. Like I want to be one.
Yeah.
Jesus prayed that we would be one as he
Mm,
and the Father are one. Plus, U2 is my favorite band, so I love the song one. So
yes.
that's two examples.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. By the way, have you seen the movie, the Mel Gibson movie, Apocalypto? Have you seen that
I
movie?
actually not.
Okay, I'm not
Is it
sure I'm
worth seeing?
recommending it. I'm not sure I'm gonna recommend it. It's like I didn't breathe the whole thing. It was very gritty, very
Oh, was it?
tough to watch. But yeah, that's all I'll say. I'll let you decide if you want to watch it or not. It was a bit gruesome. Anyways,
But
okay,
all that
let
back to leather, right? Like you can make things that are
yeah.
meaningful, and that's pretty cool.
Okay, now back to leather one more time.
Yeah, yeah.
Any parallels to the dad life? A takeaway, a learning through making things out of leather
Mhm.
that might it could be leveraged to be like, oh, here's a dad hack or a dad tip or a principle
Yeah,
in
yeah,
fatherhood.
yeah. It's fascinating to me. I don't even think about it anymore because I've been doing this for like 15 years. The number of tools and inputs it takes to make something simple. So a bracelet, I think I counted that it takes like 7 different tools to make one bracelet. And I just think about building a life that's worth living, right? Like, I mean, you're trying different tools, you're trying different things, right? You got different inputs. For me, I've always had a lot of people in my life that have been there to guide me and to push
Hmm.
me and to challenge me. And so, I just always I think in our lives, like, man, how many different inputs are we putting into what we want to shape, right? What are we reading? Who are we talking to? What are we listening to, right? What are we doing? I mean, it's to build a really good life, it takes intentionality and it takes engaging in a lot of different ways. So that would be one idea.
Yep. Oh my goodness. Being a builder. There's a proverb that says wise people are builders. They build with through insight, intelligence. I can't quote the exact reference, but man, I want to be a builder, and yet I want quick fixes in the dad life. Often I'm like, I want to
Yeah.
like build, and I forget that a builder actually has a whole truckload or a trailer full of different tools to
Yeah.
build. Yet I oversimplify and think it's going to be simple. So I love your parallel there. What else would you add to the theme of a dad being a builder? Anything else to build on that?
Yeah, I would think that the more sophisticated, if I'm thinking leather terms, the cooler, the more sophisticated, the bigger and better we want to build something, the more time and energy. In fact, when I started 15 years ago doing leather, I made a little wallet that was like um, super simple. Like
Sure.
if you saw it, you're like, bro, did your 8-year-old make that? I mean, it's like this.
Yes.
But as I stayed with it and learned and figured out, talked to people, right? So much of it was hands-on for me of let's grab some leather, and I ruined all kinds of leather, right? Like just
Yeah.
trying different things and figuring it out. But then I got to a place where about 3 years ago, I was like, you know what? I want to build something out of this expertise. So here's an example
Whoa. So if
of a
you're just
case
listening, if you're not on YouTube watching, like this is a full on, not just
full
a
on
messenger bag. It's like the full on satchel with all the
all the accoutrements. It's got the leather or it's got brass inserts inside, right? I mean, this thing
oh
took me about
my.
30 hours worth of work. 15 years ago when I started, this would be a pipe dream, right? Like there's no way. But I
And these are
start,
500 to 1,000 bucks if you're to buy a
oh bro,
leather from like,
listen,
right?
I had someone ask me when I show this, they're like, "Can you make me one?" And I'm like, "Listen,
No.
number one, no, I'm not going to spend that much time again. But number two, what I'd have to charge you,
Yeah.
make it
Yeah.
worth my while."
That's
But
amazing.
bro, 15 years ago, I knew I wanted to do something and I knew it would be meaningful. And just by doing it, doing the right things, being persistent, 13 years later, I'm able to make something that's a lot bigger, a lot more impressive, right? So
Mhm.
that's sometimes you just start small. And
Yeah.
as you learn and grow, man, things grow and get bigger and new opportunities come. So,
And if my dad skills can over 13 years, because they've got guys listening with a 3-year-old, and it's okay,
yeah,
by the time their child's 16, they actually can develop the skill of being a builder as a dad. Uh,
absolutely.
so that's
But it took a
really
lot of
fun.
time and it took a lot of messing up,
Yeah.
it took to be able to get there.
By form of introduction, 'cause sometimes I just dive right into a theme. But so
Love it.
Natalie's your wife, 23 years. Do I have that right?
Yep, we'll have 24 in March.
Yes. So potentially when it's dropped to be 24, and then son in college, daughter in high school. Did I have that part right?
Yep. My son Silas is a freshman at Samford University in Birmingham, and my
Okay.
daughter is in ninth grade, Sadie, at Buford High School. Go Wolves!
She's a senior. Fitz just finishing up. Yeah,
Oh no,
amazing.
she's a freshman.
Oh, I had that right. Sorry,
Yes,
I
she's a
heard it
freshman.
backwards.
Yeah.
He's the
She's just
fresh.
starting
Yes,
in high
yes,
school.
yes. Gotcha. That's incredible. I wanted to ask from the lens of your family and the
Mhm,
current age of your kids, the phrase, being a restful presence.
mhm. Yeah, yeah,
I think in our conversation we had, because we've only known each other for 3 or 4 months here, but I think maybe it came up in one of the conversations, and then I know it's true through your writing, through so your work leading some different fatherhood ministries,
yep.
men's ministries. What does that mean, and how would even your kids reflect on the idea of being and carrying a restful presence?
Yeah, so those two words are actually the last two words in my life mission statement, which is I exist to curate meaningful connection through caring development with a restful presence. Those words were really kind of forged in me when at 36 years old, I was given the gift of a spiritual father who led me toward a healing journey from a lot of childhood trauma and a lot of mess that I'd never dealt with. And a big part of that was a deep dive into contemplative practice, silence and solitude and meditation. All these disciplines of our faith
Yeah,
that have kind of been lost to the modern Western church, right? Like we like all the things that check the boxes and we can,
yeah,
get a bunch of stuff done. But slowing down, spending time with God and nature, what God really did for me. So when I first started that journey, I would read passages of scripture, Jeff, like Jesus said, "Come to me, all of you who are weary, and carry a heavy burden, and I'll give you rest." and you will find rest for your soul, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And I would see those comments like rest for your soul and go, man, that sounds so good. And I
Yeah.
have no idea what it means, right? Like,
Mm.
I don't even know how to get there. I'm living with anxiety and I wouldn't call it depression, but maybe depressive states, right? And I always have a knot in my stomach. And so, as I was healing, working through that trauma, engaging with deeper contemplative practice, there wasn't one silver bullet, but the culmination of that journey, right? 6 years.
Yeah.
Who was it that called it long obedience in the right direction? Brother Lawrence, maybe, or
I think it
something.
was same direction. Yes, yes,
Yeah,
long
yeah, something like
obedience.
that.
Yeah.
Uh, um, I actually, God brought me to a place where, man, I live with a soul at rest,
Mm.
and so the idea of restful presence is I not only want to live that way, I really want to bring that into my relationships, who I am, right? My kids know that I'm going to spend daily time in my prayer room, right? And so we have conversations about that. I've seen some fruit from that. Like I have a whiteboard here in my home office, and my daughter has come down before and just written passages of scripture on my whiteboard, right? And just because she's seen me kind of do some of these things, right? And so, I teaching my kids how to breathe, and just be present and anchor themselves. I mean, it's a constant battle, but it's become
Wow.
a part of how I want to parent and who I want to be.
Yeah, so these are the things I heard there is there's some healing from past things that we carry from our past that will
Mhm.
help us walk in more of a restful presence or carry that. There was a spiritual father, a mentor, someone who cared for you that helped move towards that. There's rhythms of solitude, rhythms of seeking God. Um,
Yeah.
you mentioned a few others, but would you sprinkle in any other just like, man, if we want to turn up the dial of caring, like being that for our family, which I think every dad, if we could actually lead with a restful presence, it's like a
Yeah. Yeah.
gift to our families.
Yeah.
What are there any other that you would sprinkle in that you would add to what you've already shared of just like, hey, this might help us move in that direction?
Yeah. So I'll tell you, it was actually in many regards one conversation with my spiritual father that gave me a framework for starting the journey. He happened John is his name. He happened to be my boss in ministry, but obviously became more than that. And we were at his house for an offsite planning meeting. And we're sitting around, and there's I think about 10 of us, and we got on a topic of conversation. And Jeff, man, I got fired up. Like I was pissed.
Angry, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. And the whole room knew it. And we
Ah,
got to a break, and John said, "Hey, come here for a second." And he pulled me out on the back deck, and he looked at me. He said, "Hey, what was that?"
mhm,
And I looked at him kind of confused. I was like, "What was what?" He said, "Listen, man," he says, "I know that issue is frustrating. And at one level, I understand why you're frustrated. But he said, Scott, your level of frustration was so much bigger than that issue." And he
mhm,
said, "What's in the gap?"
mm,
Man, I'm 36 years old, licensed ordained minister, and all this. And for in many regards, the first time in my life, I had an older man ask me and reveal to me through that question that I had gaps I was completely unaware of. And it was affecting everything, not just the room of ministry, but my marriage. Thankfully, my son was like 2 at the time. My daughter wasn't born yet, so it hadn't affected being a dad yet, although it would
mhm.
have. And there was a curiosity in me that was like, okay, what needs to be revealed here? Because obviously I'm not seeing it. And then he got me connected to a really, really good counselor that began to explore some of these things and began to go through, the typically the trauma and the issues we want to kind of get over it and move beyond, right? But my counselor used to say, if you really want to heal, if you really want a soul to rest, you can't get over it. You got to go through it. And so that was huge. What's in the gap? I tell guys all the time, the best way for us, the most practical way for us to understand if there's a gap that we're unaware of or need to pay attention to is think back in the last 2 weeks of your life, whether it's with your wife or your kids or at work or in your community, wherever it might be, or even just personally. Was there a time when your reaction to the
Mhm.
issue at hand was bigger than the issue at hand?
Yeah.
If there was, you have a gap, whether you're
Mm,
aware of it or not. And so I think that so do we know the gap? And then one more thing I'll say about it. There are two steps to healing and a soul at rest. First one is revealed. So John revealed to me I had a gap. I began to explore that. What we often do is we often think revealed is enough, right? Like revealed feels really good because it's, man, I never knew this before. I never saw this. I never, right? And what we tend to do is go, okay, I'm good.
Mm,
But revealed is the first step, but the second step is healed.
yeah.
So once it's revealed, there's a process necessary. For me, it happened to be 6 years because it was quite a bit of trauma, right?
Mhm.
To get to a place of being healed. And so that one question is kind of what revealed that stuff to me. And then we took that healing journey.
Wow, and you mentioned a 2 week time frame. I only need like 24 hours to think back to.
Yeah,
I mean,
I could save
truly,
20 minutes, right?
yeah, like the response, and sometimes it's like a response of even just in my thoughts, like where did that? Like I'm raging internally about something
You're
very
swearing up and down, even though nobody knows it.
or it truly it was for me it was last night. I was way like I was crabby and sharp at dinner with my girls. My wife called me out at the dinner table and that didn't make me feel any better to be called out. It's just like where's this defensiveness coming? Yeah, it's so just so I have this right, you figure out okay, there was a gap there,
Yeah,
like a level of response didn't it wasn't necessary, it wasn't a part
yeah,
of what's actually at play in this moment at the dinner
yeah.
table. So that usually the gap comes from something in the past that's unhealed or needing to be like explored further. Did I repeat that back correct?
Yeah, spot on. My spiritual director counselor referred to it in framework of false beliefs or
Mhm.
hidden vows.
Sure.
That was kind of, and there's other terminology for that, but that was the two I used. I had a false belief and that was affecting me, and I had to go figure out what that was. And
Mhm.
then I had to learn how to live in a different way, right? And you talked about it, right? Like it's revealed to you. Now, what do I do with it?
Yes.
And part of what we as dads do, and I would say as men, is we are really hard on ourselves. And so man, I beat myself up all the time, like it's and so here was a shift for me, and I'll do it in kind of a tone of voice that was huge. When I used to make mistakes or to have run into that gap, here was how I used to address myself. Oh, dang it, Scott, why'd you do that again? Right? Like, oh, it's just.
Yep.
And one of the turns I had to make was from believing that that defined me, which it didn't,
Mhm.
to turning to a place where it informed me. So here's the difference in tone of voice. Scott, why'd you do that again? Right? Like
Mhm.
from a angry, frustrated, right, to a curiosity of, okay, what's really going on here, right? And what I learned is if you can turn it away from the shame, right, and that voice and turn it to a curiosity, man, that makes such a huge difference because now it's a problem I got to solve. It's like,
Yeah.
that's interesting. That's the fourth time my wife has told me I overreacted this week.
Yeah.
What is going on there?
Yeah.
So
And this to me, it releases us as dads to lead on the home front, but also if we want to like step into God's purposes in all these other arenas, uh,
yeah,
and we do it without awareness, without it being revealed, without it being healed, we're going to bring harm in some
no
areas. We're going
doubt.
to try to like mask it over, and yeah, and often in the past, I can think of times where I led on ministry, small groups, like I led publicly because I wanted to make up for what I was feeling, and it's just like, yeah,
Totally.
it's
Totally. Yeah.
destructive.
Well, we're still gonna let's just be honest. We're still gonna cause harm, right? I mean, that's just kind of. But here's my commitment to my kiddos. One day when my son or daughter comes back and goes, Dad, you really blew it in this area. Honestly, bro, I won't have done enough work where I go, you are so right. I am so sorry, right?
Yeah,
Like, can I pay for your counselor? You know what I mean? Like,
that's it.
just to do the work to where it's okay,
Yeah.
and they feel okay about it too.
You're not surprised. You're not defensive. You're it's actually that's a perfect launch point. So I bought your book. I found it
Okay.
on Amazon. A
Thank you for the
dad's
support, man.
there you go. I'm behind you, Scott. A dad's Bible journey.
Yep.
And this is the first of, is it 8 parts or 7 parts you're going to
Well,
release?
first of nine
9.
books
Yes.
because there are 9 sections of the Bible. So this one is the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible.
And this is Guys, it says right in the title, A Dad's Bible Journey. Like it is designed and written. Here, I'm going to jump to chapter 3. The
Yep.
chapters are less than 2 pages. And
Super simple for a dad
and
to read.
exactly. And if you're watching on YouTube, you're seeing me kind of grinning and flipping through, but it's pulling straight scripture
Yep.
with direct application for dads, and
Yeah.
then you give like a paragraph of your own take on it, so it's not like it's hard to like get your arms around.
Right. Yeah.
But I'm so grateful. This one here is called Be Careful. It's the third chapter. And
Mhm.
there's 24 chapters. The whole book is
Yep. Yep. There's
80 pages
24
long. Right.
dad stories in the
Yes.
Torah.
That's it. And truly though, you dad reflection and then into two questions. So I wanted to just hit the questions to give them a
Yeah.
little
Great.
framework for us. So this is about the life of Noah and how Noah walked with God, but then Noah, end of Noah's life, there's this like horrific moment that's like, oh, what was he thinking?
Yeah.
And
Right.
uh,
Bad
nakedness
dad moment.
and too much grapes, fermented grapes. But you simply ask, is there something in your life that might cause you to make a poor decision that could negatively affect your family? If so,
Yeah.
what do you need to do to guard against this? I think about a grenade and shrapnel and like this, like, is there something that could be at some point the pin and there's hurt? That's something that I'm doing. And so, I mean, great question to reflect into. The second question, though, is what you just got after is there anything for which you owe your kids an apology? It's just
Mhm.
simple reflection of, well, there's likely an area that I have caused pain, have caused
Yeah.
shrapnel already.
Yep.
How can I pursue this posture of I apologize. I'm growing. I
Yeah.
love you. Will you forgive me? So this, I just wanted to give a little peek at how practical this book is. It'll be
Yeah.
linked in the show
Yep.
notes, of course, and we get 9 books following. So I guess I'll have to have you on 9 times every time you launch your
Yeah.
next
Yeah.
one.
I love
Yes.
it.
What would you add to that
Yeah.
theme, or even just to paint the picture of why you wrote this?
Yeah, I love the theme. This is one of the areas where, I came up out of a family with a lot of trauma, but my parents were so committed to us being in the faith. And one of the great examples my dad is my dad was not afraid to apologize and ask for forgiveness. And so one of the things in our home is a practice, and my kids roll their eyes now, right? Two teenagers. We never say I'm sorry in our home. Because honestly, what do you do with I'm sorry? I'm sorry could be I'm sorry you caught me, or I'm
Good.
sorry you feel that way. We say I apologize, right? We own the fact that we made a bad choice.
Yeah.
And then we say, will you forgive me?
Yeah.
Right? And so it owns it, and then it recognizes that I need something from you, right, in order for us to be whole. And so that's a big part of it. And how does it show up in day-to-day life? I'll give you two fun examples. At the end of every year, so I showed you, I have some bracelets that have that theme, where I showed
Yeah.
you that. I have like 7 of those, but I've been doing this practice every year, take 24 hours, did it at the beginning of last week. For the last 18 years, I go away for 24 hours. I review the past year, look forward, set some goals.
Yeah.
And at the retreat, I have that. I set the word. One of the questions I started asking my kiddos about 3 years ago is I just said, I said to Silas, here's one example with him. I said, buddy, I said, is there one area that I could get better as a dad that would be meaningful to you this year? Right.
Wow.
And he looked at me kind of sideways, and I'm like, hey, go for it. Like I told you. He goes, Dad, he said, I noticed you've been cussing at me more. And he said, it makes me uncomfortable and it makes me feel unsafe.
Hmm.
And boy, that was like, oh. And what I had been doing was in frustration, like I never called names. It wasn't that. It was just in frustration. I might be like, what the hell are you right? And so I told him, I said, buddy, first of all, man, I apologize. Like that, I do not want you to feel unsafe with me. And that's
Hmm.
something I can work on, you know? So that was one example. And if you asked him today, he'd say, yeah, Dad's done pretty good with that.
Good.
I asked my daughter the first time, and she was like, no, Dad, like I can't think of anything. I'm like, see, I'm the perfect dad, right? But I'm not. So I
Hmm.
asked her last year, and she said, Dad, I wish you would listen to me more. Because I have a tendency to jump in, right? Or I have a tendency to maybe be a little distracted on the phone,
Hmm.
right? Or and so I'm like, okay, I want my daughter to feel like I'm present with her and listen more. And so those would be a couple of examples from that particular chapter and those questions of areas where I've had to like be honest with my kids and apologize and be humble and then do the work to grow and get better.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing both those. And yeah, it's of course there's going to be 48 reflection questions in this book,
Yep.
two for each of those 24 chapters. the pause principle that you shared about taking 24 hours to start the year,
Yeah.
that's come up over the years of Dad Awesome, like this idea of take a day, take a half day, take a retreat,
Yep.
pause, look back, look forward. And I still think I would just ask somebody the other day, have you ever done a prayer retreat? Even a half day. Have you ever done a prayer retreat? And the answer I can pretty much expect when I ask people is no. Because it's scary, right? Uh,
Totally.
who encouraged you, and what would you share for encouragement to take to dad to just take a step into a process of deeper reflection?
Yeah. There's a lot of different ways. I think reading is a big part of that. Like find a topic, find an author that just interests you. And I think taking that discipline of sitting down, right? Nothing in your ears, no distractions, and reading, I think is I won't call that an easy way, but it's simple.
Mhm.
Um,
Step.
for me, I've done I love contemplative practice. I'm contemplative by nature. And so I'll usually do a couple of silence retreats a year where I go away to a beautiful place. Nature's one of the ways I connect with God. So I have some friends that have, second homes and stuff. And so I'll go just spend 24 hours. And sometimes, we make it super complicated. It's not like I'm praying for 24 hours or I'm fasting or I'm like, I get a good meal, right? I take a steak up there with me or something and make it. Sometimes I might fall asleep for a couple hours and I feel like, man, sometimes the best thing I can do is just rest, like, so
It's good.
I think it's start simple. But if I was saying, taking 24 hours might be difficult, I would say to get started, set aside a couple hours in a day, right? That you just go somewhere that ministers to you, might be a great restaurant, or, it might be a spot up on the lake that you like to take a walk, and don't overprogram it and just say, God, I just set aside this time, see if there's anything you want to say to me, right? And don't overcomplicate it. So
It's good.
hope
That's
that's
helpful.
helpful. But
It is. It is. I tend to collect friends that are doing something in the area of helping other dads.
yeah,
And because overall, it's not that common. I'll meet 100 guys and I'll ask them, and none of them will be leading something in the area of helping other dads
right,
because at least my hypothesis is most of us have heard the whisper. The enemy wants to whisper to us, you're not a perfect dad, so you can't lead and help other dads.
right, yeah,
I mean, I'm sure you wrestle with some of the same discouragement,
totally.
that voice. But you are one of those friends, Scott, that is doing something and have done for years and years. Helpful, taking initiative to
Yeah,
gather, encourage, resource, say, keep going, cheer for these
yeah.
dads. And so, I mean, you're doing this for your job with your work with Man in the
Man in the
Mirror.
mirror. Yep.
You're doing this just with friends all the time. You're doing,
Yeah.
but then you also have this initiative called Dads on Tap. That
Yep.
is
Yep.
it six
Yep.
or 7 years? How long have you been rocking that?
So it's 5.5 years now that we've
Yes,
done this. Yeah.
and created for your neighbor, wasn't it? Is that where it
Yeah.
started?
So I'll give you the quick background, Jeff. So I was a pastor, local church pastor at the time. Most of my last 30 years has been. And I'm in my neighborhood interacting with a lot of guys. And in 5 years of many of those relationships, the answer had not been, hey, come to my church. Like we got this great series. Oftentimes they didn't care, or many times they were openly hostile to things of faith because of a bad prior experience. But I'm having conversations with them, and they're like struggling with how do I be a dad, and what does that look like, and where do I go to learn? And so, um, church wasn't an option. So I went to a buddy of mine. I said, "Hey, another guy that's a great guy and he's a great dad." And I said, "Let's just, even if it's a cigar around the fire twice a year, man, like
Yeah,
something to spend time with these
yeah,
dads." He said, "Yeah, tell him, let me know." So I was meeting 3 weeks later with some friends of mine who opened a new brewery in the area, and they started talking about just using their facility to engage the community. I started thinking, man, I think my neighbors would come down to the brewery a couple times a year, have a
yep,
beer, and learn how to be a better dad. So I went to my buddies. I said, hey, if you'll give me a night, we'll try it. Dad's on tap, night for dads who care about being a dad. I want to see if I can provide a place for my neighbors to come. So, we did it. My neighbors came, a few other guys. We said, let's do it again. And then a year later, another brewery came, and then, another third brewery, fourth brewery. Jeff, in the last 5.5 years, we've partnered with 10 different breweries.
yes,
We've had over almost 50 events. We've had well over 1,000 men that have been live. We launched a podcast.
yes.
I've been able to start mentoring some younger guys, right? And it's just been a place for a lot of men, but my heart was guys that don't or won't go to
Mhm.
church, right? But they care about being a dad. And we put some formality around it, right? It's a
Yeah.
501c3, but I often say that it's faith led,
Mhm.
not faith based.
Yep.
So I tell dads all the time, if you know me, you know Jesus is central to who I am as a dad.
Mhm.
However, whether you share that faith, have a different faith, or frankly have no faith at all, not the point of Dads on Tap. If you're a dad who cares about being a dad, you're going to learn something practical that can help you be a better dad. So that's what we're doing, man.
Scott, and I know you've been intentional about no logos. So you're not letting a church grab it and say it's ours. We're going to funnel people. I love that as well. But
Yep. Yep.
just to borrow the principle for a second,
Mhm.
because there's somebody listening that is like, I'm all in. I want to start a chapter,
Yeah.
and you actually have, and it'll be linked in the show notes, a way to explore bringing Dads
Yeah.
on Tap to a brewery near you. Like
Yep.
that's amazing. But then some of us will just steal principles. Like
Yep.
we share in the fatherhood ministry world. We're like it's so fast. We're like share it, try it, do it.
Yep.
So open-handed. So the principle might be some other forum in your community
Yep.
combined with dads that is not the local church, and
Yep.
that is like it. Just so often we hold ourselves back because either we feel like we're not the dad that can be the convener, can be the take the spearhead of fatherhood. You can. And
Yep.
then
Yep.
secondly, the community needs dads to gather and encourage, and it doesn't have to be leading with Bible verses. It's truly
Right. Yeah.
so I just like celebrate what you're leading. I had already heard years ago about two different people brought up Dads on Tap, and then we finally met a few months ago. So pretty fun. The second just thing to borrow though, or anything else you would want to add about Dads on Tap before I ask my next question?
No, man. I mean, I think it's just been, it's as God often does. It surprised me, right? Like I started for my neighbors, and here we
Right.
are 5 years later, just doing unique stuff. And we do it once a quarter, and we invite community wisdom to come and share. And so we've had superintendents, we've had coaches, we've had counselors, we've had authors. I mean, we know there's so much wisdom sitting right in our community that don't have a platform that we can provide a little bit of a platform for them to be able to help influence other dads. So I'll tell you one other thing, Jeff, to
Yeah.
your point about, man, I don't know if I can get this started. I was having coffee yesterday with a guy who's a part of my local one I lead here in our community in Buford. And he was telling me, he's like, Sky, he says, I've started just doing this little, I invited a few guys just around the fire pit. We're doing this thing like once a month. And I was like, bro, you need to tell the guys at Dad's on Tap this because honestly, I don't need to go create that. If you're doing it, like let's go, go do that, And so sometimes you might feel like I got to have this big platform or I have to. No, sometimes if you just there's something you enjoy or you have a heart for something in your community,
Mhm.
just go invite a couple other guys to be a part of it, and see what
Yes.
God does with that.
And I want to just go in a step deeper. That guy who's hosting that campfire, like that guy is a hero. And
Oh,
he doesn't
totally.
have a logo, doesn't have a podcast. He doesn't have, so what Dad's on Tap has become is, people are like, whoa, this is amazing. The guy at the campfire, though, took the initiative, invited guys in, and somebody's dad is sitting. So the dad sitting next to him at that campfire has got a son and a daughter who need a dad who's bringing their full heart, experiencing healing,
Yep.
experiencing some friendship, experiencing a safe place around that fire. And like their entire journey as a little boy and a little girl could be changed because of this hero who
Yep.
just said, I've got some wood in a campfire
Yep.
pit. And it's so simple, but so
Yeah.
few of us are saying, I'll go first. So
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to like applaud what you are. There's a ripple effect that you're not going to know about. You're not going to know about all the things that spawn from there. One last just principle though, you've created within the Man in the Mirror ministry, like
Uh-huh.
some initiatives to just move guys one step
Yep.
and in
Yep.
the direction of um, seeking wisdom from someone older than you. And often our churches are filled with a generation of guys in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and then a bunch of guys in their 20s, 30s. And there's not, I left out a generation, 40s. I left out my own.
That's it.
But just and I'll send guys to the Spiritual Fathers page just to learn more about
Yeah.
what you guys
Yeah.
are doing. But just to steal the principle, what's the
Yeah.
concept that you're teeing up to get guys together?
Yeah, so I'll actually give it. I'll rep a friend of mine. So because of Dad's on Tap, I was talking to a friend named Kay Hiramini. Kay is the founder of Holy Smokes, if you've ever heard of Holy Smokes.
I've heard of it. Yeah, yeah.
And when Kay heard about the work I'm doing, he says, I got to connect you to the guys at Man in the Mirror because he said they're going to love it and they're working on some things that you'll care about too. And so, man, we had a conversation a year and a half ago. I joined the team to lead spiritual fathers. And, I wouldn't be here today without John in my life and a few others that had those important conversations with me. And we've kind of lost that intergenerational connection in our world, right? Like we're very connected to our peers and we got a lot of stuff, even if it's not deep, right? It's
Yeah,
sports and it's, all these things that we're,
sure.
but where in our culture do we get connected to older men of wisdom, right? That can help us and some of the things we're wrestling and struggling with. And so we're doing it man in the mirror. We're trying to help with simple little things like a cup of Joe with a younger bro is a pilot we're doing in a couple
Wait, say it.
cities
Say
this
it one more
year.
time. What's it called? One more
So
time.
it's called a cup of Joe with a younger bro.
I love it. And
And
you're encouraging guys just one time. Go grab a cup of coffee, and then,
so
then it's being initiated by though the older dude
so
initiates,
here's
right?
with that particular one, there's two sides to that, Jeff. The cup of Joe with a younger bro is connected to spiritual fathers.
Mhm.
And we're going to be working in Indianapolis and Cincinnati with several churches to train a group of older men.
Yep.
How do you have that cup of Joe intentionally, and then how do you develop it from there? The other side of it is that we know that just relationships with men, or they call it there's a friendship crisis in our world and we're not connected. We're launching a national Joe with a Bro Day
That's it.
on
Yes.
March the 14th, where we're just going
Yes.
to encourage anybody. It doesn't have to be an older guy or younger guy, it could be peers to say, hey, invite a friend, right, to have a cup of coffee that day and have a conversation. And
Yes.
you're going to ask three questions. Tell me your story.
Mhm.
What's God doing in your life right now? And how can I help? That's it, right?
We
And
want in. I'm gonna make sure that we want in. I want to get
so,
our guys to do uh Joe with a Bro Day, a national
yep.
day, global
National
event.
Joe with a Bro Day, March 14th of 2025. And we're going to have, I believe it's going to be joewithabro.com. We're getting it all set up now. The
Great.
next week or so, should have a page where you can go sign up, download those questions, right? And just make a commitment to go have an intentional cup of coffee, right? And start a spiritual friendship and see what God wants to do with it.
Okay, Scott, this is to me, this is fun to give practical, like, try this. Hey, try this. And there's probably a dozen other spots I wanted to hit in this conversation, but this is round one because we've got to go back, have you back for every launch of the next
Totally.
eight versions. No, Scott, I wanted to just ask you, is there anything you wanted to leave, this conversation, the Dad Awesome crew, anything else you'd want to leave with us? Any ideas or encouragement or challenge?
Um, well, we've hit a lot of good ones. Think if there's anything that stands out. Um, yeah, how deep do I want to go into this? Yeah, so before my healing journey, there was several things I struggled and wrestled with. Um, so we all have a dream of who we want to be, right? Like I want to be a great dad. I want to be a great husband. I don't want to deal with anger. I don't want to feel like I'm just overwhelmed by lust, right? I mean, all these things. But oftentimes there's the dream we have that I believe God's given us. And then there's the reality of how we're actually living, right? So, I have this dream, but I'm struggling with pornography, right? I'm angry at my kids and so what we often do as men is we often try to gut it out. And what we say to ourselves is, just try harder, right? Like, just and if we're really good or really disciplined, we might be able to gut it out for a while, right? But then we end up in the same patterns and same issues and whatever. And so, man, I lived in frustration for many years until the journey of healing took me to a place where I realized that those things I'm struggling with are just the symptom. And no good doctor ever just deals with the symptoms.
Yeah.
They figure out the underlying causes. And so what I realized was is I took my focus off of the symptoms and I began to dig into those underlying causes. And what I discovered was that with the healing of brothers like you and with the healing of the Holy Spirit and with the healing of some mentors, I was able to live into the dream God had for me
Yeah.
by doing that deeper work in my life. And I would just say to dads, if there's something you're struggling with, you can't figure out how to get beyond, uh, don't invest too much time trying to gut it out and figure it out on your own, or just try harder. Jesus in scripture never
Mm.
told us to try harder or work harder. What did he say? He said, give up.
Yeah.
You can't do it on your own. You need my help. You need the Spirit's help. You need your community's help, right? And so sometimes the best step is to say, I'm going to give up and I'm going to call my buddy and we're going to have a coffee and I'm just going to have a place where I can talk about it and figure out how do I deal with these underlying causes. Because I really believe, man, that we can align the dream and the reality of our life can be really, really closely aligned so that we are living into that calling and purpose that God has for us, man. And that would be something I would love for all dads to experience.
Scott, thank you. Would you actually just pray a short prayer of that would come into reality because of the kingdom of heaven
Yeah,
in all of us dads?
would love to, man. Would love to. Father, Scripture says, in you we live and move and have our being. Thank you for your presence with us. It also says that where two or three are gathered in your name, that you're there somehow in a unique way. So I believe that's true for Jeff and I, but I also believe that it's true for all those that will listen to this podcast, that you are going to be present with them in a unique way as we have these conversations. So God, just bless the men that are out there. I pray that you would give them answers to the questions they're struggling with. I pray that you'd connect them to the right people. Pray that you'd use this short conversation to maybe spark something in them that they could go explore, that they could take a next step, that they could learn more about. Maybe they just reach out to Jeff and say, hey, I'd love to talk more about this, God. Because at the end of the day, you have a purpose and plan for us. And the fact that we are still here breathing means you're not done yet. And so we hold on to that hope. And God, we thank you for caring. We thank you for how much you love us as our Heavenly Father and pray this in your name. Amen.